things we get to do on a daily basis are unmatched in civilian life. It wasn't until about the 5th ride in the T-37, and then that evening I went home and said a little prayer to just let me do this the rest of my life and be able to feed my family.
These are the pilots that fly the most sophisticated military aircraft in the world. They fly higher and faster and deploy more weaponry than any other pilots in the world. They live and train on remote air bases and carriers all around the world. While much has been said about their aircraft, the pilots are largely unknown. This is their story. This is what it's like to be a frontline pilot and what it takes to stay there. This is a profile of the aviators that command America's frontline military aircraft.
Heads up on the waist, 9 clear while pulling out. Heads up on the waist, stern to top, heads up waist.
Well, as we taxi up, there are 2 young enlisted men that come up underneath my aircraft, right under the engines while they're turning. It's a real hazardous job. One puts what's called a dog bone in the back of the landing gear. There's a little special fitting that's the holdback fitting. And what this dog bone looks like, it looks like a little chewy toy that is precision milled. And that thing for the A6 is made to snap at 58,600 pounds. Exactly.
There's folks that said that's the most fun you can have with your clothes on, because you're going from 0 to 150 miles an hour in about 2 seconds.
During the day, we do what's called a clearing turn, where the moment you are clear of the deck, off the front you turn to the right, and off the waist you turn to the left to clear away from the front of the aircraft carrier, so that if something happened and you had to bail out or eject immediately, that the carrier wouldn't run over you.
Increase your rudder left 30 degrees. Increase my rudder left 30 degrees.
Bravo 0.
Approaching guns, no flares, and we won't be using flares out there today. Just all spin, primo.
What I need you to do is take 307 and 406 and get them fore and aft. Go ahead, Sam.
The nighttime, it's like being thrown into a closet, because you're just essentially seeing some lights off the ship and suddenly it's black dark.
Every approach at night off the carrier starts as what most pilots would call a precision instrument approach. It's sort of like going down a mine shaft in the middle of the night with just a single point of light out there in front of you. and when the ocean starts pitching and heaving a little bit, it can get real sporty. We're way out away from the carrier, all stacked up in a Marshall stack, much like it gets when Atlanta gets all fogged in or something, and everybody's circling and waiting. And we come down at 1-minute intervals at a very precise profile over the ground, at a very precise speed. You know, many times in the Navy you'll work blue water operations where there are no diverts available, so it's either bring it back aboard or eject alongside the ship, and most of the people, the latter option is not a good one, so they'll do whatever we've got to do to get the airplanes back aboard.
With the way the ship's designed now with the angle decks, it's actually moving away from us and slightly to the right. So we're always correcting for lineup, moving to the right, and then it's moving out from under us. So you have to keep up on the power. If you pull the power, boy, you'll fall out of the sky.
What we're striving for as you roll wings level behind the ship is to be on a 3.5 to 4 degree glide slope, depending on what the wind is during the day. And it'll set us down right in front of the number 3 wire.
You hit the deck at about 650 feet per minute, and then immediately add power as if you're going to miss all the wires and go around. And if you happen to get a wire, fine. If you don't, if the hook skips a wire, that's called a bolter, and you immediately climb away from the ship, then go to 1,200 feet, and you start all over again.
We keep a safety buffer on everything we do, and one of those safety buffers is tankers that are airborne at all times. And if somebody's having a tough time, there's going to be a tanker where you can go up, get some gas, relax a little bit, come down, and make another attempt. Personally, I've never seen a situation where the guy was in the barrel that bad.
Still manages to scare you sometimes after you land. You're sitting there on the carrier deck holding the brakes and your knees are shaking and you're going, hey, I don't, stop that. To tell you the truth, after flying off the ship for a while, if I had an emergency, I'd much rather have it at the ship. Picture yourself in an airliner going 130 knots down, a runway at Dallas-Fort Worth, and the guy blows a tire, he has an engine fire or something. Does he have enough flying speed to get airborne? Does he have enough runway to get stopped? For me, when that catapult fires, I'm going flying. I've got my flying speed, all that's built in. If my aircraft is working, I'm fine. If it's not working, I've got an ejection seat to get out of it. So, the Navy's provided me a lot of options there.
Bringing back a crippled aircraft is often the test of combat. One A-7 pilot faced a carrier landing with no nose gear and a 1,000-pound bomb that wouldn't release.
How to do what we call barricade them. And what they do is we put up a big net, and essentially he flies his aircraft into the net. It's a very difficult approach, and the fact that he had a weapon that if it did jettison on touchdown or through the net could explode. And essentially what we did was clear the flight deck except for essential personnel, had the net up, and he flew a real nice pass into the barricade, and it was uneventful, fortunately.
Competitive, tough, unrelenting. For military aviators, training is constant, and the standards are high. They have to be high, because in combat, lives are on the line.
When you come back out of pilot training, you think that you have the handle on it, but you really don't. I think that's about the 5-year point that it gets to be like that. The modern military talks about the total weapon system, and that it includes the pilot. The pilot's not a separate piece of machinery in there. When we go to WESUP, which is a weapon system evaluation program down at Tyndall Air Force Base, and we shoot live missiles out over the ocean, they are judging the entire weapon system to include the pilot because he is considered part of the machinery at that point.
program is also a test to see if you can comply with the program.
Professional pilot, like a surgeon, you follow the correct procedure because it is the correct procedure.
We go out, we train constantly. That's our nature. A lot of the missions we do take quite a bit of concentration, and a lot of times puts us in positions that aren't quite as comfortable as you'd like, flying through the mountains at night with a bombardier navigator looking at his radar and determining whether we're going to fly through a valley or into the side of the mountain. It takes some nerve, takes some cool under pressure.
You get to know one another quite a lot when you fly with each other all the time. You know each other very well. You know how another pilot may react in a certain situation, where you expect him to be, what you expect him to do, what you expect him to say on the radio, how you expect him to get to a target and get back out.
Get to a point where the structure doesn't hinder you. It becomes second nature to you. It's just something that's there. It's not something that's in front of you. It's just something there with you.
When I was going through pilot training, for me a good day was when they let me go out and solo the airplane, and I got to go out and I got to do whatever I wanted to do, and I didn't have any curriculum to follow. And if I didn't want to do the checklist, nobody was there to watch me. And you go out there, you get in the jet, and all in the front of your mind the whole time you're thinking, I can do anything I want, and you wind up going out to your area and you wind up practicing the stuff that you would have practiced if the IP was there, because you know you got a check ride coming up. You run all the stuff you would have anyway.
Bulldog Golf 35 descending to base plus 13. Contact the traffic 10 on Mendoza.
Copy. Contact. Copy Golf. Salmon 63 is up. Salmon 63, copy.
There's definitely personality differences, no doubt. It starts right in pilot training. It's not by chance that a guy gets into a fighter. It's based on his performance, and it's also based, just on his personality.
The guys at the bottom of the list usually get some sort of heavy, and the guys at the top of the list either get fighters or are instructor pilots.
If you're going to strap on an F-16 and go up there by yourself and successfully penetrate enemy airspace and avoid their defenses and avoid their other aircraft and their missiles and everything else, and get to the target and put your ordnance on target and then come back and survive, you better be cocky or you're probably not going to be able to do it.
Descending now.
Bang,
start singling.
Okay, we'll be back in a minute.
That's 25 knots.
Driving the airplane is not the end in itself. Delivering the weapon or making the mission is the end in itself. That's why we're constantly training to a higher level. Keep the stress high. It's just like working your body. If you're looking to run 5-minute miles, you don't walk all the time. You run a lot of 5-minute miles.
Once we're in the air, we must function as a team. There's one head, and that's the flight lead, but there's a lot of body out there, and that comes in from the other aviators. The guy flying with you a lot of times is your eyes for the threat, and he would be the one to call you to expend flares or to brake to defeat the enemy threat coming towards your aircraft. There are things that you just can't see, and we look for each other. And I probably owe my life to some very, very capable wingmen who called out timely threat reactions and had me expend flares or chaff to negate SAMs that were coming up to me that I was unaware of.
They are as long as a city block. Their tail sections dwarf a 6-story building. Their wingspans cover most of a football field, and their gear assemblies are twice the height of their pilots. These are the heavies, and their pilots manage large crews, complex systems, and still fly a massive machine with a steady hand.
It's beautiful. Yeah, it's a pretty day. And look at him streaming fuel. He's got a little bit too much.
We as a tanker want to fly the most stable platform that we can so that they can rendezvous with us and get their gas and be on their way.
I really love air refueling, both a receiver and tanker both, because you get to see different airplanes and you get to work with different people. And in my job, the best mission you could have is go down and get in a group of fighters off the coast where you got F-16s and F-15s and F-4s and maybe a couple of F-111s, and they're all doing a strike package together, and then you throw in an AWACS that's been on orbit directing the team, and you're refueling them all, and then you get a 135 for yourself, and you get some time too. That's the ultimate mission there. You've got everything. You're doing it all. You're doing heavies, you're doing fighters, you get to see it all.
The 4-4 aircraft, say again?
It's inherent that you will help out your fellow pilot any way you can. You will help out your fellow buddy, your fellow aviator. You will go in and do what you need to do to get the job done. And if that means that you're going to short yourself 10, 15, 20,000 pounds of gas in my airplane to get another airplane home or give that extra offload to make sure the guy can hit that target, you'll do it. You'll make it happen.
I should have a second A6 coming up here to the number 3 tanker here. He's right over on the right, Skipper. Okay, I've got 2 F-18s running underneath us. There's the other A6. Those are the electrics now.
Our receivers were coming back and low on fuel, and we needed to get rendezvoused with us in order to get their gas and continue on. And we were trying to get separated and trying to get into some clear weather, and we were trying to climb higher and go lower and deconflict the airplanes. And people were kind of, well, there was a lot of high tension and yelling, and the boom operator would have them in sight and we'd need to go this way, and the navigator would want us to go another way because we had another airplane, another receiver coming in that the boom operator maybe didn't have in sight yet. And at the same time, the pilots were coordinating with other tankers that were at consecutive altitudes, and just a lot of things happening at the same time. You can't bring any home or family problems with you. You need to leave that stuff behind when you're flying and think about your mission and what you need to do. And I guess that's something that you need to tell yourself and not let anything else bother you.
Copy 2, Pitbull 1. If we could get you to turn around here in the next couple of minutes and take us at least to the north point of the track, that'd help.
The hardest thing about tanking at night is seeing a large group of lights out there and joining on that large group of lights. Once you get, because you have a tanker and he has 3 or 4 aircraft already on him, and you have to figure out, okay, what's his aspect and how I can safely get aboard this guy without someone else hitting me.
You're cleared back over to the right wing, Pitbull 3. Right. Or when you come off, go to the right wing.
Copy. Fighter 4-3, copy 01 is over the CP at this time in a left turn to 325.
The guy I talked to is a F-111 pilot. He said after the first night, he said he was coming home, the weather was fogged into this base he was supposed to get to, and the call came up and said, don't worry, there's a KC-10 orbiting right there waiting for you. And he said, man, see that sight was just unbelievable. He said, here I am, number 6. I'm tail end Charlie, and he said, man, I just knew that there was enough gas waiting for me that I wasn't going to have a problem.
I've refueled the F-15, F-16, F-111, and F-4 Air Force style. And I've refueled the A-4, F-14 Navy style. And I think it's a much more challenging task to refuel where you're putting the probe into the basket.
Copy 1-3. Back a left turn, and we're going to climb up to 310-320.
Why don't you let the 2 join in the clear here first?
Okay. Track 1 would go.
Yes, sir.
See number 2 coming up the trail.
NX on the
That's affirmative. We're all joined now.
We're climbing to 31320 for Canopies.
Up 31320.
Well, Jimmy, you showing anything coming at me, buddy? Yep, here they coming.
No, I'm just looking at the big packages up there.
Boy, that's going to irritate me if those birds went up there to the KCs and they forgot about scheduling the Air Force for that one. These guys are coming in on us, sir.
Yeah, I got a couple slid in. We got more receivers coming? Yeah, 3 more.
How much gas do I got left?
Oh.
Bingo's going to be 11?
Yeah, let's make it 11. We got about 30 already moved. We got plenty of gas.
Can't allow weather to change what you're going to do. It's an inconvenience and it makes things a little harder. I mean, you have to follow a few different procedures and rules, and some of your options may be closed down a little bit, but the weather's not going to stop a war, so it's not going to stop your training, and it's certainly not going to stop anything when you're on a deployment.
How much fuel was remaining in the tankers, and made the decision to leave 2 up here as a post-strike just in case.
With a full load of fuel en route to its station, this KC-135 encountered deadly wake turbulence that ripped 2 engines off its left wing.
All of a sudden, we just started this bank, and then all of a sudden, just like that, we were going to 9 degrees of bank both directions, and the nose was going up and down, and it was a tremendous Dutch roll. It seemed like it took forever for the co-pilot and I to get us out of it. I don't know, it was, I say 20 seconds, but I have no idea. It just seemed like it was forever, and we were fighting it, and we were able to get it under control. We had lost about 4,000 feet. We were at 21,000 feet then. Then we couldn't hold altitude or airspeed because we were too heavy. We still probably had 155,000 pounds, no, 160,000 pounds of gas probably, because we took off with 175. And so we immediately started dumping. 2 fire lights were on in the number 1 and number 2 engine. I asked the boom operator to run back and scan the engines. He ran back and scanned the engines and said that they were physically missing from the airplane. So then we didn't worry about the fire lights anymore. We knew we didn't have any left hydraulic pressure, obviously, so we had to dump all the gas using the aft pumps. When we got down to about 100,000 pounds, we were able to maintain altitude and airspeed. Everybody had their helmet and parachute on, got our gloves on. We weren't really sure if we were going to have to bail out or not till we got the gear down. We turned and just headed back to the base.
I think it's the hardest thing I ever learned was to air refuel the C-5. You're pushing a wake in front of you that moves his tail around. If you come in a little bit to the left, he'll move to the right. You can actually steer his airplane. The control inputs that you put in to stay behind the tanker have to be so small, and you have to be so far ahead that you're actually, if you want to move the airplane 3 foot to the right, you make that right input with just a flick of your wrist. Then you make a left input to stop the airplane, stabilize it. And it's just real hard to learn. If you're thinking about it as you're doing it, you can't do it. It's feel. It's a feel you get for it. The system that moves the C-5 is so huge. The system around it. You do an F-15 launch. You go out 30 minutes prior. You do your pre-flight. You come out an hour prior. You do your pre-flight. 30 minutes prior, you walk around the airplane. You get in. You start the engines and you go. You come out in the C-5 4 hours and 15 minutes prior is your alert time. You show up 3 hours and 15 minutes prior. While you flight plan, the engineers, usually there's 3 or 4 of them, go out and do a 2-hour pre-flight on the airplane. The loadmasters, and there's usually 5 or 6 of them, go out and load the airplane. You got to get your whole crew together. They got to all be there. You got to get them on headset. Now you got your passengers loaded. You got checklists to run. It takes you forever. And there's, that is a different mentality. If you're a fighter guy coming to the MAC world, it's just so frustrating, that you can't get out there and get the airplane off the ground sometimes because of the external. We've just picked up 4 or 5 brand new co-pilots just out of pilot training. And the first thing almost all of them do is they drop their bags off, walk past the ladder to go up to the flight deck, walk back to the very back to the T-tail, and they look up. Almost the first thing they always do, because they just cannot believe that they're flying this building around, which, you know, size-wise, that's what it is, the big old hangar building. And but once you get into the seat and get your hands on the yoke, it's a different story. You don't think about what's behind you.
As you roll onto the runway, you have to move these 8 throttles because we're just kind of involved, and a lot of times it's just hit and miss. You know, we lose engines on takeoff. You know, it used to be frequently. They modified the system. So once you get a little closer to the speed where the plane actually takes off, it's kind of neat because I don't know. It's just, you know, here I am rolling down the runway, bouncing around. I guess there's a lot of vibration, and you're pretty tense and everything. You're seeing all these runway markers go by. You're saying, "Oh my God, are we gonna get airborne?" The wings start flying before the actual fuselage starts. One thing that we have to do for our check ride is go up and get the airplane into the air fueling position, and then move in increments of 2 feet in that position, and explain to the student where you're going. You know, it's amazing. Here it is. You know, you got 180, 200,000 pound airplanes. Okay, well, I'm going to move it 2 feet to the right. We practice at 400 feet. And, you know, that's not very much when you consider if you go into a 30-degree bank that the tip of your wing is probably 200 feet off the ground. And aren't there trees like 200 feet high?
Falcons, eagles, tomcats. Names that belong to aircraft designed for speed, agility, and deadly accuracy. They're a special breed of aircraft, and it takes a special breed of pilot to fly them.
We're all kids at heart. We all want to be out there in the sports model, and we'd all like to be doing that.
First time you put the thing in afterburner for your first takeoff roll, and it pins you back in the seat, it also sort of pinned a permanent smile on your face. The acceleration of the airplane, the power of the airplane, the layout of the airplane, you just sort of, instead of sitting in it and flying it, you just sort of wear this airplane.
Today's modern fighters are so well designed. When I go supersonic, the only way that I really know I'm going supersonic is to look at the gauge inside the aircraft and go, I'm going supersonic. There is no big bang, there's nothing, no bells and lights and whistles don't go off in the cockpit. You may notice stuff going by pretty fast, but you really can't, you really don't know whether you're going supersonic or not without looking at the gauge.
I don't think of ourselves as elite. I think we're pretty much the average fighter pilot. We do have some higher qualification criteria in order to get into the program, and that includes 1,000 hours of fighter time in a previous aircraft, or 750 hours if you have an instructor pilot check, and some kind of air-to-ground experience. Other than that, we take a broad gamut of pilots from across the tactical forces. What we're looking for is not so much piloting skill, but maturity and the capability of flying by yourself at night in a single-seat aircraft. The F-117 is a very easy airplane to fly, and the pilots do not have trouble employing it.
got a vector going up like that, the only way to change that vector is to change the aircraft's attitude. There's two ways to do it. You could push the stick forward and push the nose over, and if you do that, what you'll induce is a great amount of negative G, and that's extremely uncomfortable, and it'll usually bleed off a lot of energy. Whereas if you roll inverted and pull back on the stick, you'll be inducing positive G's, which is much easier to accept in the human body.
That's what's great about the heads-up display. It's like looking at a picture. You immediately just absorb all that information. On there, we get our angle of attack, our heading, our altitude, our rate of descent, our airspeed. It's right there. We don't have to look down in the cockpit.
It's just like the fighter pilot. You know, yes, it's great to be flat on your back and hosing the other guy and shooting him down and all that thing, but a lot of flight discipline got him there. Not a lot of romantic notions about punching holes in the air or anything. You end up there. You end up punching holes in the air and doing all those things, but it's usually your high degree of professionalism and aviation skills that got you to that point.
Reach 651. Let's push it up. Come. 2, threat, southeast 5. Good team, running southwest, 901.
Will the systems work? Was the training right? Will the aircraft perform? These questions and more are always faced by pilots in combat. In Desert Storm, the answers were immediate.
It was like the last time we put to sea on the way to Desert Storm. The ship stinks from all the oils and the solvents and the diesel smells and the pain of loading all your gear aboard and the tools and all the stuff that goes into maintaining the aircraft. I turned to the skipper and said, "You gotta like this. If you don't like it, you get out."
There was a little bit of fear and concern, first of all. There's also the trauma of facing the possibility that you may lose some of the guys that you have grown very close to, who are your buddies and your comrades in arms. But mainly, I think my prayers that evening prior to the war were for me to perform properly and to not let my unit down and to be able to do the mission.
Okay, out to 230. Come stern. Check speed. Speed is 470. They're shooting guns, but when we blew the living snot out of them, though. 601. Special on it. Following us. Yeah, it's falling way behind us. Yeah, good.
Picture clear.
How high up does it look there, Skipper? Oh, it's below us. Well, I mean for our wingman. Chance of explosion. Picture west. Guns are going off all over the place.
Time hack.
Nice shooting too.
10, check position.
10 now. Sign off. Stay off now, 090.
There you go. Boom. Check high.
190.
Roger, 2 visual with 3 only. Join up.
Check your position. Just check your position, we can join up.
One so short.
Captain 2 still got 2 miles. Roger, 270 from Boulevard 2, 130 nautical mile.
We went into Kuwait. We had over 40 surface-to-air missiles launched at us. At that point, it was more missiles launched at any single flight in the history of aviation. And there was a lot of screaming on the radios with guys breaking and near misses with SAMs and last-minute jinx to avoid getting hit. But we went in, we knocked out the majority of the sites, we shut down the ones that we didn't completely destroy, and we got out with no losses.
As pilots anticipate the increasingly sophisticated cockpit environment of tomorrow, they realize man and machine will be integrated in ways never thought possible. As much as they are aviators, the pilots of tomorrow will be information managers as well.
The pilot will evolve because I think his workload will get bigger and bigger and bigger. As weapons get more sophisticated and the mission, of course, gets much more sophisticated, the threat is certainly getting more sophisticated. It puts more demands on the pilot and the aircrew. What you'll see the next generation of aircraft moving into will be eye-watering.
I noticed two gentlemen were looking at the airplane talking to each other, and they were, I guess they had been World War II pilots, and they walked up, I walked up and said, hey, you know, how would you like to buy one of these today? And they were laughing and said, boy, we were born 20 years too early. And I told them 20 years from now I'll be standing there looking at some sort of a stealth fighter going, yep, I was born 20 years too early also.